Hi, it's Jonathan, and welcome to another Trident video. Today I'll be reading you some articles about the war in Ukraine from magazines that I got a few days ago. If you have watched my other videos, you may remember that in my Operation Blue lecture video, I presented a slideshow on electoral democracy to a class in high school, in which I commented on political repression in Russia, including the arrest of a man for his 13-year-old daughter's drawing in opposition to the war in Ukraine, before distributing cards to the class directing them to my Trident series. Well, on May 10th, a staff member in that very same class gave me a gift of his own, 4 magazines by the New York Times Upfront, a magazine published by Scholastic Corporation and the New York Times for use by high school students. Of those magazines, 2 of them have articles about the war in Ukraine. One of them, the edition from March 13th, 2023, contains the article Russia's Propaganda Schools, about attempts by the leaders of Russia to imbue pro-war messages into the curriculum, to convince children to support the Russian government. The other one, the edition from January 9th, 2023, contains this as the front page article, an article called Children of War, about the effect of this war on the children of Ukraine. This staff member thought correctly that I would be interested in this. Therefore, in this video, I'll be reading this article, namely pages 10 through 15 of this issue, as well as accompanying details of it. Now, let's begin with this reading. January 9th, 2023. The New York Times Upfront, the news magazine for teens. Children of War. The fighting in Ukraine has devastated the lives of millions of children. Many people are trying to help. Page 10. Danilo, 12, surrounded by destroyed homes in his neighborhood near Chernihiv, Ukraine. Children of War. The fighting in Ukraine has devastated the lives of the country's 5.7 million children. Many people are trying to help. By Erika Solomon and Megan Specia. Bogdan, 10, in front of his family's apartment building in Chernihiv. In a March 2022 airstrike that killed dozens, a bomb tore through his bedroom seconds after he ran for cover in the hallway. Watch the video, The Day I Became a Refugee, at upfrontmagazine.com. 14 million, the estimated number of Ukrainians who fled their homes, including 7.8 million who fled the country. Source, United Nations. 430, the number of Ukrainian children killed in the war as of November 7th, 2022. Another 827 children have been injured. Source, a Ukrainian government website. 2,300. Number of schools in Ukraine damaged in the fighting. Source, a Ukrainian government website. Children of War. By Erika Solomon and Megan Specia. The situation in eastern Ukraine where 14-year-old Kamila Horbachova lived was getting increasingly risky. Russian artillery constantly bombarded her home city of Toretsk. First, the electricity went out, and then the water. Kamila's parents, who have essential jobs in mining, couldn't leave, but by April of last year, they knew they had to get their daughter to safety. So they took Kamila to a nearby train station and put her on a train full of children bound for the relative safety of Lviv, the largest city in western Ukraine. I was very worried that we were leaving without our parents, by ourselves, Kamila said, adding that when she boarded the train alone, it was horrible for me. When Kamila looked at her phone midway through the trip, she saw the news that the very train station she had stood in the day before had been bombed. Russian forces shelled the station in Kramatorsk on April 8th. Killing at least 50 people trying to get to western Ukraine. The children had been scheduled to leave at that time, but a last-minute twist of fate had pushed their trip up a day. It just happened that we left earlier, Kamila says, her face drawn. She says that she thanks God daily that they escaped with their lives. Kamila's story echoes those of millions of Ukrainian children. Since Russia invaded in February of 2022 and Ukrainians launched a strong defense, tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians have died. See Where the War Stands, page 15. No victim of war survives without some kind of loss, but experts often say that no one loses as much as children. Every one of Ukraine's 5.7 million children have trauma, says Mirat Sahin, who represents the United Nations Children's Agency UNICEF in Ukraine. I wouldn't say that 10% or 50% of them are okay. Everyone is experiencing it, and it takes years to heal. Life in Lviv. Kamila Harbachova, lying down with glasses, and Anna Palova, with red blanket, watch a movie in their temporary home. Subarticle. Becoming a refugee. Irina Kisalik, 16, is from the village of Shklo, close to the western city of Lviv. As news of the Russian invasion spread last February 24th, she and her family began preparing for the worst. Here's her story in her own words, translated from Polish. I remember that first night was the scariest of my life. I didn't close my eyes even once. The next day, when I was at home, my mother called and said, "Stay calm, but pack up your backpack. For yourself, for your brother, with everything you need the most." And then I felt so bad I started crying. When you ask if it is possible to put everything into one backpack, your whole life, you understand that you can't. Dad drove us to the Ukraine-Poland border, and then he went back home. We went by foot, not by car, because people in cars waited in line at the border for 3 days. It was so mentally hard, really. I would not like anyone to feel how I did then. My dad called later and said, "I'm sorry for everything. If something should happen, remember that I love you all." I told him, "Don't say that. I don't want to hear it, because in 1, 2, 3 weeks we will come back home and everything will be fine." From the border we are taken in by friends, and now we all live with them in Warsaw. We all live in the same room. My mother, my sister, and my brother. But we don't think about this when we read the news about what's going on at home, when Dad calls and says what is happening, when you read that our army has nothing. My friends who stayed in Ukraine worry about their lives. They don't know what could be next. Will you survive the night or not? Now my father is fighting in the war, and when asked what will happen, he says he doesn't know. I am proud of all of them. We are Ukrainians, and we should have freedom. A lost generation? More than a third of Ukrainian children, 2.2 million, have fled their homes, with many of them displaced 2 or 3 times when additional territory was lost, according to humanitarian agencies. More than half of Ukraine's children, 3.6 million, may not have a school to go to this year. With all this upheaval, time is dwindling to prevent a lost generation, a term not only for young lives taken, but also for the children forced by war to sacrifice their education, passions, and friendships amid the disruptions, or suffer psychological scars too deep to be healed. Across the country, aid workers and Ukrainian officials are scrambling to repair bombed-out shelters and offer children psychological support. We believe in the resilience of children, says Ramin Shazamani, chair of War Child Holland, a group that focuses on support for children in conflict zones. If you are able to reach children as soon as possible and help them deal with what they have experienced and what they have seen, then they are able to deal with their emotions. That resilience is evident in the way that children have adapted in their daily lives. For example, inventing a game based on the frequent checkpoint stops they encounter when traveling anywhere. They mimic the grim reality they witness. Caption: Living with war. Teens play cards at a bomb shelter in a Kharkiv subway station. Russia versus Ukraine. Leader: President Vladimir Putin since 1999. President Volodymyr Zelensky, elected 2019. Population 142 million, 43.5 million. Major exports: oil, natural gas, coal, wheat, iron. Corn, wheat, iron, sunflower seed oil. Active military personnel with asterisks saying pre-war totals: 850,000, 200,000. Estimated casualties after 8 months of war: 100,000, 100,000. Sources: for World Factbook, CIA, Global Firepower, General Mark Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Returning to the article, injuries and trauma. Even so, they must deal with unhealed psychological trauma, and the effects are not only mental, but also physical. Children exposed to war are at risk of toxic stress, a condition triggered by extreme periods of adversity, says Sonia Hush, the Ukraine director of Save the Children, a humanitarian aid group. The effects are so powerful that they can alter brain structures and organ systems, lasting long into children's adult lives. Many children have also suffered serious wounds. The destructive power of modern weapons can leave children with complex injuries that require amputation and long rehabilitations. After an attack on her home in Kherson last May, Marina Ponomaryova, 6, is relearning to walk. Most of her left leg had to be amputated because of shrapnel wounds. Even though Marina has approached her recovery with a positive attitude, the ongoing bombings in Kyiv, where she is being treated, have been hard for her. The psychologist has been working with her, but then it was all reversed again. Her mother says of a recent attack that upset Marina, she was screaming that morning. Education is critical to psychological support, Hirsch says. Schools provide children with social networks among peers, guidance from teachers, and a routine that can provide a sense of normalcy amid pervasive uncertainty. But education isn't easy during war. At least 221 of Ukraine's approximately 17,000 schools have been destroyed, and more than 2,000 have been damaged by war, according to UN statistics. Another 3,500 have been used to shelter or assist the 6.2 million Ukrainians who have fled to safer parts of the country. The social destruction is even harder to repair. The war has ripped thousands of families apart, as brothers and fathers have been drafted or killed, and children forced to flee, leaving grandparents and friends behind. Aid workers have noticed a growing problem of nightmares and aggressive behavior in young children. Children separated from their parents are among the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, says Joe English, a communication specialist from UNICEF. The psychosocial impact the war is having on children is staggering, and it is often parents and caregivers who are the first responders in terms of identifying and responding to children's suffering. He says, unaccompanied children do not have that basic comfort of parental care. He adds, one of the major unknowns of the war is the number of children orphaned or separated from their parents. Russian officials have also forcefully deported tens of thousands of Ukrainians from occupied territories into Russia. According to Ukrainian officials, many are believed to be children separated from their parents. Fearing for children's welfare, some groups are trained to help. Ukrainian activists are using clandestine networks inside Russian-held territory to try to get information on those children, and if possible, bring them back. Marina, age 6, learns to walk on her prosthetic leg after her left leg was amputated. Playing checkpoint. 2 Ukrainian boys with plastic guns pretend to be soldiers on a highway in the Kharkiv region. Longing for home. There is hope for orphans too. A new effort, led by the Ukrainian government and UNICEF, has encouraged about 21,000 families to register as foster families. Already, 1,000 of them are trained in taking children in. Kamila, the 14-year-old from eastern Ukraine, is now living in a former boarding school in Lviv that serves as a refuge for children from Toretsk. The 20 children there who range from toddlers to teens, are navigating a strange new reality. They go to school and have movie nights, reclaiming something of a normal childhood, even as they frantically call their parents daily to make sure they're alive. There are other challenges, including language. In Toretsk, Russian is the main language. An estimated 1 in 3 Ukrainians speak Russian at home, including many from the country's east, as a result of centuries of Russian dominance there, according to research. At the boarding school, the children learn in Ukrainian. The teachers say the children have adjusted to the changes. They play soccer in the small field outside and take field trips to the zoo. On a recent evening, the children curled up on beanbags and snuggled next to each other as they watched the animated movie Inside Out in Ukrainian on a large screen. While grateful for their current refuge, they long for a true return to normal. "It was just a miracle that we were saved," says Anna Palova, 15. "I just want this war to be finished and return home to my parents." Erika Solomon and Specia cover Europe from the New York Times. Where the War Stands: No End in Sight for the Conflict in Ukraine, by Patricia Smith. After many months of fighting, the brutal war in Ukraine looks increasingly like a long-term conflict. When Russia first invaded almost a year ago, many expected its soldiers to quickly overwhelm Ukraine's smaller, less well-equipped forces. But that didn't happen. Ukrainian forces performed much better than expected, and the Russians suffered shortages of both troops and equipment. That forced Russia to narrow its goals for the war. It abandoned its assault on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, and concentrated on taking control of the eastern part of Ukraine, where many Russian speakers live. Russian President Vladimir Putin's ultimate goal, however, remains unclear, and attempts at peace talks have been frozen since July. In the fall, Ukraine retook more than 2,300 square miles of territory that Russia had held in the northeast and made significant gains in the south. In retaliation, Russia launched long-range missiles at Ukraine's major cities, targeting power plants and heating facilities needed to keep Ukrainian civilians warm through the winter. Russia has maintained a huge advantage in terms of artillery, ammunition, and heavy weaponry. But U.S. intelligence experts estimate that at least 20,000 Russian troops have died in the war. That's more than the number of Russian soldiers killed in 10 years of war in Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989. The Russian army is seriously depleted, says Seth Jones of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. That has implications on their ability to fight an effective ground campaign in Ukraine. In late September, Putin ordered a partial mobilization that drafted more than 200,000 men into the Russian army. The troop call-up prompted protest, and more than 200,000 Russian men fled the country to avoid it. With its problems mounting, Russia has begun threatening to use nuclear weapons. The war has also been devastating for Ukraine. A government official said over the summer that between 100 and 200 soldiers are dying every day, and according to the United Nations, more than 12,000 Ukrainian civilians have been killed. With front lines still fluid, Russia moved to annex the Ukrainian territories in the east that it mostly controlled. In September, Russia held a sham referendum and then announced that the territories had voted to officially become a part of Russia, a move the international community calls illegal. The UN General Assembly voted 143-5 to condemn the attempted illegal annexation of Ukrainian territory. The United States unequivocally rejects Russia's fraudulent attempt to change Ukraine's internationally recognized borders, says U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Russian missiles have targeted power stations like this one in Kyiv. Ukrainians fill water bottles left after the water system in the Kherson region was damaged by a Russian attack in October. Ukrainian troops fire at Russians on the front line in eastern Ukraine. Right. How you can help. Some organizations that accept donations to aid Ukrainian children. UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, unicefusa.org. Save the Children, a global charity focused on children. SaveTheChildren.org, Doctors Without Borders, a group that provides health care in war-torn regions, DoctorsWithoutBorders.org. Those are the articles, so on to the outro. And now you have heard me read out the articles Children of War and Where the War Stands. The first article was written by Erika Solomon and Megan Specia, two writers of the New York Times, while the third was written by Patricia Smith. Children of War is quite an informative look into one of the problems caused by the war in Ukraine, the displacing of citizens of Ukraine, particularly children, as a result of the fighting. As mentioned in Children of War, one of the children interviewed, 15-year-old Anna Palova, said, "It was just a miracle that we were saved. I just want this war to be finished and return home to my parents." Anna, I agree with you. This war has caused plenty of harm to your fatherland and to its inhabitants. I want it to end with the return of every man, woman, child, and acre to where it belongs. I am willing to support Ukraine until victory. In the meantime, I'll add 3 charities that the article mentions to my list of charities. I suggest that you donate to these charities since they provide help to children like Anna. I hope you found these articles informative. If you did, stay tuned for my reading of the article, Russia's Propaganda Schools, written by Anton Troyanovsky and published by the same magazine. For now, I'm Jonathan Lombardi, and this has been Trident.